Karen's laugh was a chainsaw, cutting through the quiet of my inbox with a notification that screamed trouble. Your Airbnb guest refuses to leave. The message read, and my heart sank faster than my phone's battery in rural Thailand. I'd been backpacking across Southeast Asia for 3 months, living out of a duffel bag and savoring the freedom of no Wi-Fi, no worries. My cozy 2-bedroom cottage in suburban Oregon was listed on Airbnb to cover the mortgage while I was gone. It was a simple setup, a quaint place with a white picket fence, a rose garden, and a reputation for being the perfect retreat for quiet travelers. I'd vetted every guest meticulously: families, retirees, the occasional writer seeking solitude. Then came Karen. Karen, whose booking request came with a profile picture of her in a leopard print tracksuit, smiling like she'd just won an argument with a cashier. Her application was sparse but passable. Retired HOA president, looking for a peaceful stay. I approved her for a 2-week rental, thinking she'd be gone by the time I sipped my next mango smoothie in Chiang Mai. That was my first mistake. When I finally got a signal in a Bangkok hostel, my phone buzzed with a neighbor's email. "Some lady's been living in your house for weeks," wrote Mrs. Delaney, the sweet retiree next door who watered my plants. "She's acting like she owns the place, yelling at kids for riding bikes, taping HOA violation notices on mailboxes. We thought you sold the house." My stomach churned. Karen's 2 weeks had ended a month ago. She hadn't checked out. She'd moved in. I called Airbnb support from a noisy street market, dodging scooters and vendors shouting about pad thai. The rep's voice was calm but useless. "We've contacted the guest, but she claims she has a right to stay. She says she's part of the neighborhood now." My jaw dropped. Part of the neighborhood? She was a tenant, not a title holder. I demanded they escalate the case, but Airbnb's process was slower than a tuk-tuk in traffic. I booked the next flight home, cutting my trip short. Karen had turned my sanctuary into her personal fiefdom, and I was about to storm the castle. When I landed in Portland, jet-lagged and furious, Mrs. Delaney met me at the airport with a thermos of coffee and a stack of photos. They showed Karen waddling around my front yard, pointing at neighbors' hedges like she was Napoleon surveying a battlefield. She'd even hung a sign on my mailbox: "HOA President Karen report violations here." The audacity was breathtaking. Mrs. Delaney whispered. She told me my roses were non-compliant and threatened to fine me. "On your property." I clenched my fists. This wasn't just a squatter problem. This was war. I drove straight to the cottage, my heart pounding as I pulled into the driveway. The rose garden was trampled, replaced with tacky plastic flamingos. My front door had a new lock, one I didn't own. I knocked, then pounded, until Karen's face appeared in the window, her eyes narrowing like a cat spotting a rival. "What do you want?" she barked through the glass, her voice dripping with contempt. "This is my home now. I've improved it." "Improved it?" I shouted, gesturing at the flamingos. "You're trespassing. Get out." Karen smirked, folding her arms. "I'm a resident. I've filed for adverse possession. You'll hear from my lawyer." Adverse possession? She'd been there 6 weeks, not 6 years. I called the police, my hands shaking as I dialed. This woman wasn't just entitled, she was delusional. The cops arrived within the hour, 2 officers with tired eyes and clipboards. Karen flung open the door, her leopard print muumuu billowing like a supervillain's cape. "Officers, this man is harassing me," she declared, pointing at me like I was the intruder. "I'm the HOA president here. He's just a landlord who abandoned this property." I nearly choked. Abandoned? I'd been gone 3 months, not 3 decades. I showed the officers my deed, my Airbnb contract, and Mrs. Delaney's photos. Karen's face reddened as she sputtered. "Those are fake. I've been maintaining this community." The officers weren't buying it. "Ma'am, you need to vacate the premises," one said, his tone firm but weary, like he'd dealt with a dozen Karens before breakfast. Karen's jaw dropped, and she launched into a tirade about her rights, her contributions, and how she'd upgraded my home with her presence. The officers exchanged a look, the kind that said, "Here we go." They handed her an eviction notice, but Karen tore it up, letting the pieces flutter to the ground like confetti. "You'll regret this," she screamed, slamming the door. I spent the next day with a lawyer, filing for criminal trespass charges. Karen's stunt wasn't just bold, it was illegal. She'd changed the locks, rerouted my mail, and even tried to enroll in the neighborhood HOA, claiming she was my proxy. The HOA president, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, called me in tears of laughter. She showed up to our meeting with a clipboard, demanding we repaint all mailboxes blue. We thought she was your cousin. The absurdity was almost funny, but the damage wasn't. Karen had scratched my hardwood floors, stained my carpets, and left a pile of violation notices in my kitchen, each one scrawled with her loopy handwriting. The eviction process was a nightmare. Karen refused to leave, barricading herself inside with my furniture stacked against the door. Neighbors gathered daily, whispering about her latest antics, yelling at the mailman, accusing kids of loitering on the sidewalk. Mrs. Delaney sent me a video of Karen waddling down the street, taping "no parking" signs on every car. The neighborhood was fed up, and so was I. A week later, the police returned with a court order. I stood in the driveway, heart racing, as they knocked. Karen's voice boomed from inside. "I'm not leaving. This is my home." The officers didn't hesitate. They forced the door open, revealing Karen in my living room, surrounded by takeout containers and my throw pillows, now covered in Cheeto dust. She clutched a broom like a scepter, shrieking about her tenant rights. The officers cuffed her, ignoring her protests, and escorted her to the squad car. Neighbors clapped from their porches, a small but triumphant cheer. Karen's belongings, cheap wigs, knockoff designer bags, and a stack of HOA rulebooks were hauled out by a cleanup crew. The eviction notice, crumpled and torn, lay in the grass, her handwriting still visible. HOA Karen moved into my Airbnb while I was abroad, got evicted, and charged for criminal trespass. It felt like poetic justice, a title she'd written herself. The aftermath was bitter but satisfying. Karen faced criminal trespass charges, a hefty fine, and a ban from Airbnb. My cottage needed thousands in repairs, new locks, new floors, and a deep clean to erase her presence. But the neighborhood rallied around me. Mrs. Delaney baked me a pie. Carla offered to waive my HOA fees for a year, and the kids down the street planted new roses in my garden. They'd seen Karen's tyranny and chosen kindness over chaos. I learned a hard lesson. Entitlement can turn a guest into a squatter and a home into a battleground. Karen thought she could bully her way into my life, but she underestimated the power of community and the law. As I sat on my porch, sipping Mrs. Delaney's coffee and watching the sunset, I felt whole again. My home was mine, not because of a deed, but because of the people who stood by it. Karen's reign was over, her empire reduced to a rap sheet and a pile of flamingos in a dumpster. The end.